Welcome to John Fallon's Indie Film NYC podcast, where we merge the art and business of independent filmmaking. I'm your host, John Fallon. Over the years, I've worked on many projects, and while all of them had to have music and sound in them, I have surprisingly little experience of working directly with a composer. The reason for that is because many of my projects had budgets that supported hiring sound mixers and composers, and those decisions were above my pay grade at the time. So basically all I had to do was export an XML, they did their business, I did mine, they sent it back, I laid the tracks in, and we were good to go. But then on my indie projects, with both web series I had producing partners who already had relationships with composers, so I let them navigate through that part of the production. And on my biggest short film project so far, I had more of a sound design than a score. And I did it all myself because that was just what I chose to do. So now that I've got both a short film and a feature film on the horizon for myself, I thought I'd put in a little research into both what a composer can do for your film and how to most effectively work with that type of artist. In my research, I really started to understand that a lot of my preconceived notions about the role of the composer were misinformed or flat out wrong. That led me to thinking that a lot of you out there might be a little lost as well when it comes to finding, hiring, and working with a composer for your next project. Through some relationships I've made through Indie Film NYC, I was able to connect with a musician and composer, Stephen Letnes, and he agreed to come on the show and talk about all aspects of working with a composer to score your film. All right, I want to welcome Stephen Letnes to the podcast today. How are you doing today, Stephen?
Really well. Top of the world. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm just sitting here in New York. It's starting to get chilly. The leaves are falling, so it's a beautiful time of year here in New York.
It is. Autumn is a great time of year. It's my favorite.
So I wanted to get a little bit of your background before we get into some of the actual work. So I wanted to know a little bit about your musical background, but more specifically how that background led into working in film and television, because it's my understanding that you started out not doing stuff for the entertainment industry.
Yeah, well, when I was a wee little kid, I wanted to be a world famous piano player, and so I grew up on the piano and violin, learning Chopin and Rachmaninoff, and Tchaikovsky, Debussy, Shostakovich, Kavalevsky, and I really fell in love with the more or less the Russian romantic sound of the late 19th century, early 20th century, because there's a lot of passion there. Like, I want to do that too, and so I worked really hard to cultivate the piano skills and write my own stuff. I didn't want to be a concert pianist and play other people's stuff like Van Cliburn or Horowitz, even though those are gods in the classical world. I wanted to write my own stuff and become a world famous touring solo piano player, and that was like the 90s when there was a lot of that going on. There was a lot of Yanni and Jim Brickman and Lori Line, Lori Line, was it? No, not Lori Line. And just a lot of piano players, but it was a lot of new age stuff, and I never liked the new age sound, and so I incorporated the Russian romantic, aggressive, assertive type of flamboyant sound into my own piano stuff. But that is a hard world to get into, and I was super young, and there are a lot of really good pianists out there. So I did that for a while, but my eyes got bigger than my mouth, my dreams were really big, and I kind of realized in my 20s, I don't think this is going to happen. Like, all the work I'm doing is just not leading towards getting, bigger sponsorships, because I was being courted by different sponsors, and I was like, this is great, but I was naive. I didn't understand the work that went into understanding what I needed to do. I just thought as long as I practice, as long as I work hard, keep writing music and practice and do shows, that's enough. Well, it's not. And especially, if we were to talk to somebody nowadays, hey, how do you make in this world? And it's, well, you practice, you write great stuff, and you cultivate relationships, and you do social media, and you do interviews, and you network, and you travel here, and you do face-to-face, and it's a litany. Many books have been written about it. So like I got into doing film after I understood that I didn't think I was going to be able to make it as a piano player. It's a very long-winded answer, John. Maybe you need to edit that down.
No, it's quite all right. And so tell me a little bit about how you took those steps. Like what specifically did you do to start working with filmmakers?
First of all, I will say this. When I was young, I did do a lot of progressive metal music, like a lot of prog rock, Rush and Dream Theater. Dream Theater has always and forever will be my favorite band, and it's because back in the 90s they had a keyboardist named Kevin Moore, who was my hero, and he's the one who taught me about multi-timbral instruments and using multiple keyboards. In other words, he was the one, when I was really young, who taught me that you can do more than one instrument at a time. And you can layer a whole bunch of stuff and do multi-rhythms and polyrhythms and different keys and key chord changes, chord progressions in a way with other people. So that's how I really observed that, I love synthesizers, and so that's why I figured, okay, I can layer stuff like that. So that was a great lesson that preempted my later understanding, getting into film and stuff, because it was a friend of mine had met and ended up marrying somebody you interviewed in the past, Ken Feinberg, and so I met him when he came to visit up here in Minnesota when I was working retail sales, and he just came by the store with a friend of ours, and so through him I understood what he was doing and learned that he was into filmmaking and doing all that kind of stuff. So I would, from time to time, submit little pieces of music to him and to say, hey, this is what I'm up to. I know you're a busy person, but just every couple months, I just send him a note, say, hey, how are you? I'm your wife's longtime college friend. I'm just saying hello. And I would send him a piece of music, and sometimes he would respond back, and sometimes he wouldn't. But the key there really was to say, look, I'm developing, I'm working hard. I would like to help you with short films that you're doing. Just keep me in mind. I want to be a part of what you're doing. Just keep me in mind. But not being a pest about it. And that then lent to, like in 2012, he used one of my piano pieces in a short film of his that went to Cannes, which was really cool. I was really excited. That was my first experience. But then from that, we then got to know each other a little more, which then led to more short films, and ultimately the feature film that we did together where I scored the whole thing. That's Santa's Boot Camp. That's the holiday film that's coming out this Christmas through Sony.
And now, so along the way, when you were sending him these pieces, was he using those in some of his short films already, or that you guys were just building that relationship?
Just building the relationship. I mean, I probably sent him 10 to 15 different pieces over the course of a year or two, and he ended up using one in one film. So it really wasn't much there. But honestly, it's like anything we do, John. Whether you're looking for editing jobs, whether you're looking for music jobs, it's sales. It's a numbers game, and 1 out of 100 opportunities is going to work out. How much of any artist, any filmmaker who's listening to this podcast, how much of our day is spent each day reaching out to different people who never get back to us. And we end up taking it personally, because if for filmmakers or for creative people, we are going to take it personally. We're emotionally invested in making art, and we want others to be a part of our journey, even though these other people have their own journey. They have their own stuff going on. And so, who's this email I'm getting from so-and-so? I briefly glanced at it. I've got other stuff to do. And so it becomes a numbers game of catching somebody and seeing if they're interested in being a part of what you're doing. And then you build your network. But it's a numbers game. That's really, as tough as it is, we can't take it personally, and we got to keep trying every day to reach out. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be in the right place at the right time if you don't go to that place in the first place. So
absolutely. and that's but the funny thing is though is that's what people kind of don't understand, especially like when we're talking about composers, is a lot of us kind of write our music because we tend to be kind of betas. We were soft spoken. A lot of us are shy. Some of us aren't. But we tend to write a lot of music, put it on certain websites, and just hope that people click on it and find us. When you gotta get out. You have got to reach out. Go to networking events. Go to different places in town. Travel places. Just be a part of a community. Find a way to ingratiate yourself with others. Be a part of the community. Be willing to help. Help others. Offer to render aid when they need it, but be sincere about it. And a funny thing is you may not find the exact answer you're looking for, but by simply putting yourself out there, there will be other opportunities that will help other parts of your creative life or other parts of other people's creative lives. But you've got to get out of the house, people.
No, that's great advice. I mean, networking. It's all about the collaborations you make with and who you're working with.
And the big question is that yes, okay, you network, but you can't network while being a jerk. One of the big questions that I've done through the films that I've done and through talking with other composers, other filmmakers out there, the first question that people ask isn't about your talent. It's, can you be stuck in an editing bay for 6 to 12 hours a day with this person? Mm-hmm. Do you want to be in there with somebody who just doesn't know how to carry on a conversation, doesn't understand the concept of yes and, who they contribute to the conversation, they're laid back, they're easy to get along with, they're not combative, and they want, for the greater good, they want to be a part of the process, and they're not going to take things personally, and it's for the greater good that they do stuff. That's the first question that people ask. Are you a decent human being?
Sure, yeah, they want to know how you are to work with.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about, probably most people don't know that you're legally blind. So talk to me about what are some of the specific challenges for you being legally blind and trying to do all this stuff you've just been talking about.
Yeah, well, being mostly blind is a big struggle.
Tell me, before you tell me that, define to us as probably most of us are just regular sighted people, what does legally blind mean, and then speak about the challenges.
Okay. I guess one way to put it is a lot of people out there, that it seems to be growing more and more, might have grandparents who later in life they realize, oh my gosh, I can't see well. I can't drive anymore. I can't see my grandkid's face. I can't do the things that I used to. A lot of people have heard of that kind of scenario. And what that is that's called macular degeneration. It's the center of the eye where the real eagle eye stuff, that's what, fighter pilots really need, up when they're flying their aircraft, is the macula. And what I have is macular degeneration, but I have a dry kind. So I can't drive. I can't do a lot of stuff, but I can still see enough to recognize the things that I can't do. Like drive or fly a plane. I can still see the plane. It's like I was born legally blind. And honestly what that is, it's just a government standard that says anybody with vision of 20 by 200. What that means is what I see at 20 feet, you can see at 200 feet. It's just a standard measure that is used to qualify somebody as legally blind. I was born at 2200, but in my teens, I started getting worse and worse vision, retinitis pigmentosa, macular degeneration. So now I'm at 20 by 450, 20 by 500. So I don't see well. I use assistive technologies, different screen readers on my computer. The iPad is huge because it reads my emails to me. And so thus, what being blind has done for me is forced me to learn how to use the tools at my disposal incredibly effectively. Because when I got into doing film, one of the biggest things that scared me, John, and a lot of people talk about it, is time. You got to be real good, real fast. And you got to edit this stuff in X amount of time. You got to write this piece of music in X amount of time. And if you can't make good stuff quickly, you're SOL. You are out of luck. You're not going to make it. And I was terrified by that. So I forced myself to just learn to use not only the music tools, you're whipping up and down on my keys so I can whip out melodies and stuff real quickly on the piano to record, but also how to quickly use my assistive technology. How do I streamline my workflow so I can compete with anybody? And the best. So my fear of not being able to do something in a timely manner, I don't worry about anymore, primarily because I have done so many short films where I've had to write music in such a small amount of time. It forced me to make quick decisions, trusting my instincts, following your gut, and acting upon those, not looking back, and submitting whatever it is when they tell you to submit it. Can you reach deadlines? And by that constant practice of here's the deadline, here's the amount of films, write the music, get it to us, I learned that, it is possible. It is achievable even as a person with a disability to compete with people who don't.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's amazing. I mean, we all think, oh man, I have to learn this new program. It's so difficult. But then we don't have that added layer of learning curve that that some people do. I mean, whatever your disability might be.
Sure, but the trick is like for people like myself, persons with disabilities, we can't internalize that. So having a disability, it sucks. What are you going to do about it? Especially in the arts. But here's the irony of this, John, is yes, you have to learn to work quickly in the arts, and yes, having a disability adds time to that clock, or sort of takes time away from that clock to make it, because we spend more time getting to the level where you guys are at over there. But okay, big deal. That's what you got to do. The irony of the arts is that people in the art community, in film, in music, in television, they don't care what's quote-unquote wrong with you. So long as you can make a great product and you can get it to them, and they love your attitude, they like talking to you, and you make a great product, they don't care. Because who cares Steve's blind? Like, he writes cool music, it fits for my film, let's hire this guy. Who cares this person is deaf? They really can use Final Cut Pro like a pro, and they really edit really well. I don't care that they're deaf. And so the arts is a great place it just doesn't matter what challenges you have, because at the end of the day, the product is king, product is queen. It's just, you can't internalize it. You have to move forward. But it also forces people with disabilities, and in truth without disabilities too, how do you become a problem solver? In this case, persons with disabilities, we are natural born problem solvers every day, every waking hour, and that's got to be a good confidence builder. But it is true for everybody. Are you going to contribute to the problem, or are you going to talk to the director and find a way to solve the problem? And that's something that we all have in common.
Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of the process when you're working with a filmmaker. So I guess the first question that came to my mind was, when a director decides to come to you, how much do they usually know about what they're looking for, or are they relying on you to show them what they need? What's that process, the initial process when you first start working with a new director or producer?
Yeah, a lot of them might have some basic idea of what they're looking for. They might say, "Oh man, I really like that Hans Zimmer sound. Like I want music like that in my film." Or they might say, "Oh, I totally love Star Wars. Like I love that traditional orchestra sound. That's the sound I'm looking for." And that's honestly enough to go on. I mean, there are different types of sounds, or some people might like the sound of like the Braveheart sound or the Titanic sound, or they might just have a movie that they really love the score to, like in 300, or like Social Network for Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, or something. And that's honestly enough for any composer to say, "Oh, okay, is this something that I can do, or do I have another recommendation?" And most composers are going to say, "Oh, I can do that," whether for good or ill.
Sure.
And so that's usually what they say, and then you go to work, because then they hire you or they talk to you, and you come back to them. They might give you like a scene to see, or a director's cut, or a master timeline to watch. But then what I do is I go in there. I then turn to them after I've seen the film and say, "Look, here's what I'm thinking. This is what I think we should do," and then we discuss a little bit. Because they're turning to you, because you're the composer. You have to have an idea of what fits. And then they might agree with you, or they might not. But they are relying on you to have an opinion and to provide a different kind of music that they might have heard on SoundCloud or your YouTube channel or your own podcast, or wherever your music is, wherever they found you. Mostly it's going to be through networking and people saying, "Yeah, this Steve guy, he's all right. This John guy, yeah, he's a good editor. Go talk to him." That's usually where it's going to happen. Anyway, but it is incumbent upon you. Usually people like directors or producers will come to you, honestly, in most cases, after it's been shot, like after everything's been edited, to just a rough cut. And then they'll usually start looking. It's kind of rare to hire a composer early on in the filmmaking process, which is unfortunate. I would really hope and encourage producers and directors to find a composer early. And as you do different scenes, or you do different edits or different tones, you kind of toss the reel over to the composer and say, "Hey, this is what we're doing right now. I just, you don't have to write anything, but this is what we shot in the woods, just so you know the kind of feel we're getting, that we're going for." It's better to give the composer a little more time. But I would ask other producers and directors to try to bring composers on early.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's always a good thing to start creating those things. Give yourself as much time as possible, like you were saying.
Yeah, it's always crunch time, and especially it's always crunch time near the end. I mean, there's no such thing as a final cut anymore. I mean, people are. I have a buddy who's editing TV shows over on the Fox lot right now, and we'll chat from time to time. And he'll say, "Yeah, I mean, we get 3 types of edits for this particular TV show that he's working on." And he'll say, "But it's up to the last day, last hour that we're still cutting. We're still cutting." And so there's really no such thing as a final cut for a composer to work with. And so composers, we have to be very flexible, again, understanding how to use our tools, so that when a director says, "Look, hey, I just shaved 3 frames off of this scene. I need the music to adjust to it." We got to be ready for that up until the final day of deliverables.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't realize how much last-minute call they put out to you. So
there's a lot. That's just kind of the name of the game, Or maybe like you shoot an indie film, and then you get some distributors who are interested. Say you got a composer. This is the other reason why you should hire a composer early on, is to build a relationship, because a composer, you might have a contract with a composer that says, hey, he or she will do X amount of edits for it. But if you build a relationship with somebody, people want to help. People want to be there, part of it. You don't want it to just be a transactional experience between the film creator, music creator, editor, and whatever. That's not the reason why we got into the arts. That's not the reason why we got into a community of filmmakers to help tell a story. So that's why it's better to bring as many people as you can early on, so you can say to them, look, okay, we've shot this, but we just sent this to the distributor. They really would like us to recut certain parts of this. Hey, so-and-so, can you go back and recut the music to fit? There are a lot of people down the way that are going to have suggestions as far as your film is concerned, and people just have to be ready to be flexible to adjust and do a little extra work, especially on the tail end. It's always fourth quarter, 2 minutes to go in filmmaking, it seems like,
Sure. So another thing that I find, as a filmmaker myself, is that, each discipline has kind of its own jargon and its own language, and I would think that would be really, really true with music and composing. So with that, how should a director or producer talk to a composer to kind of make a better collaboration? Like what kinds of things can help them, quote unquote, speak your language?
Sure. I will say this. The most important part of that is, can you guys or gals, just get along? Because so long as you get along, you guys will find the right words. If you're a bit combative and your personalities don't match too well, it doesn't matter what terminology a director tries to use with the composer or vice versa. It just ain't going to work. You're going to be button heads the whole time. So that's why it is so crucial to find a composer that you get along with, that you can chill out with. Do they live in the same town? Can you go grab a coffee or grab a beer with them and have a good chat? Because at the end of the day, since I'm blind, I don't know the terminology for or I barely know the terminology for things for arranging music on paper, like an orchestrator would do, of crescendos and fortes and diminuendos and crescendos and codas. Even for me, even though I have a basic understanding of what that means, I don't use them. I don't care. And so, directors certainly don't need to. And so really what we're looking for from a director is just sitting down with them or the producers, and they're saying, here's the feel I'm going for. I want this to be a sad anti-hero. I want this to be a vigilante. This is just think Wolverine, but he's really ticked off, but he has to kill the wrong person for the right reason in this scene. And that is definitely enough for a music person to say, I feel you, I totally get it. It's that's really all we need are some adjectives. Explain the scene, explain the arc of the film, and that is then the composer's job, is to say, all right, from what I'm reading from what you're saying, how I'm understanding it, this is what I want to do with the music. And then you go back and forth to make sure you're on the same page, and then the composer goes into their cave and hammers out some stuff, and then the director's like, dude, this is perfect. Or, no, sorry, this doesn't work. Can you simplify it? So really the language of talking between director and composer really is just, do you have a good relationship? Because if you have a good relationship from the start, it doesn't matter the kind of words you're using. You'll both find a way to understand where each other's coming from.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know, myself, I speak a lot from, a film history standpoint. A lot of my reference comes from film and television, mostly films. So do you feel like you do a lot of studying about, the soundtracks that are out there? How much time and effort are you putting in to, modern filmmaking techniques away from the job?
How much am I putting into education outside?
Self-education, I guess. Because for myself, every time there's a new program out, if there's a new, a new color correction program, I go and I learn those things because, nobody's paying me to do it necessarily, or I might not have a job right now on it, but to know that ahead of time is obviously helpful. So, what are you doing in that regard as far as what kinds of things do you have to keep up current with to effectively be a collaborator.
Yeah, that is so amazing. That is so true. It's like nobody makes a ton of money in independent filmmaking, but like the reason why you hire a composer isn't for the time for them writing the 80, 90 minutes of music. You're paying them for the years of experience that brought them to your door to write your 80, 90 minutes of music, and it's a nice philosophy that would be the case for anybody. When you hire an architect, you're hiring. There's a reason why great architects say they've had 40 years of experience. You're not paying for the building; you're paying for the 40 years of experience leading up to that building. That's why you should be paying your composers. If your editors are getting paid, if your producers are getting paid, damn sure you better be paying your composers, because there's a lot of education that goes on. For example, here's the thing: you want to know where music is right now? Watch commercials. A lot of people write a lot of library music for commercials or library music for like CBS Sports. And so if you want to know what direction music is going in, you'll watch commercials. That's the standard by which people are measuring where music is going, because it's a commercial is kind of is a microcosm of society at the time. So you can kind of pick out, okay, that's the kind of music that's being used for these kinds of commercials. I can write that. And so you go and you write music like that, or you learn, or you can, a lot of us composers, we all use a lot of the same tools. And so we can hear the different libraries. We can hear the different instruments that are from different libraries of sounds that we all incorporate. And that's where the education comes in. Thus, you can oversaturate the market with a certain type of synth sound. And so through watching commercials, through education, through understanding what music is selling, what kinds of sounds are being overused. Where is that original sound that people will gravitate towards? Because the funny thing is you're doing education to see where the standard is, where the music society, where society is at for music, and then you're trying to find your own voice in that. So it does take a lot of work. And I personally am a big fan of theme music, like Indiana Jones or Star Wars or, Star Trek. How to Train Your Dragon. John Powell is amazing. James Horner is my hero. He did Braveheart and Titanic. Like John Powell is a great composer that I love right now. And the kind of music that I like is thematic music, which people will say is it's older kinds of music. Theme music is old. It's 70s, 80s, 90s. And nowadays it's more about music beds underneath the stuff. It's rare to get many themes in films anymore, and I understand that, and I could go chase the dragon and learn how to write more music beds, but that's not my bag. My bag is writing orchestral music, with some synth stuff, with some dirty undertones that I like Fury Road, Mad Max Fury Road, sure. But what I want to do is do orchestra stuff. And so honestly, I learn a lot I take master classes out there. There's one guy out there for composers who are listening called Mike Verda, Verta. Mike Verda does these master classes that are 5, 6, 7, 8 hours long to teach people about writing music, but it's traditional orchestral writing. And that's what I want to do. I don't even remember what your question was.
No, just about how, the question was basically, the thing that people don't understand about, particularly freelance artists, but filmmakers in general and artists in general, is that, like you said, the time that they're sitting, in front of the computer or wherever doing the actual work is just a minuscule amount of the time investment that goes into cultivating your art form. There's just so much study, like you said, a 6 or 7 hour masterclass, that you're paying out of pocket for, or it's a business expense probably, but you're putting that time and effort in when people are going to the park on the weekend or whatever they're doing for their enjoyment, because their 40-hour week is over.
And so our 40-hour week never ends because there's no such thing as a 40-hour week for an artist.
It's always midweek. It is always midweek, John. I mean, there's no time off, and I'm fine with that. I'm happy to sacrifice this and that for filmmaking, for music creation, because that's what I want to do. You know, some people, decide to take that plunge and forego certain things in life, like a family or children or travel or huge houses or cars or whatnot, and that's fine, and that's what I don't mind doing because I love what I'm doing. But it is always midweek, and you got to find people who are willing to take your phone call Saturday at 6 p.m. Sunday at 2 in the afternoon during a Vikings game or a Giants game. It's who's willing to pick up your phone call or answer your email at the most unusual times, and those are the kind of people you want to work with.
Absolutely. So when you're working with different kind of mediums of film, is there a different approach when you're scoring, say, a short film as opposed to a feature film?
Different kind of approaches? Yeah. I would say that, with a short, you don't necessarily have to worry too much about things like story arcs insofar as writing different themes for and smaller themes that support like a short story. Generally, there's one kind of story you can't fit too much into a 5 to 7, 10-minute short, and so it's more about understanding the language of the film. Like in a short film, if you're filming something in the woods, maybe you use a lot of wooden malleted instruments, for example. You may not use a lot of synth stuff, but you might use a lot of organic sounds for a film that's happening in someplace natural. Whereas if there was a short in space, you might use more synths. You might use more digital sound. So I think for short films, at least, and I might be a little biased here, but the key, whether it's a short or a feature, is first understanding the language of the film and the kind of music you're going to use, the kind of instruments, the kind of music beds, like I was talking about earlier, for the short. But the same goes for a feature film. But for a feature, that's where you get to have a little more input insofar as writing a main theme for the arc of the film. And if the director wants, then you can write smaller themes for different characters, and then you can get into counterpoint and interweaving themes. So the feature and the short, both you ask, what is the language of the film? Understand the tone, understand the bed by which the music creates. But with the features, you simply have more time to develop more themes, and you just have more time for development, I guess, is the shorthand, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I asked because I think that, one thing about independent filmmakers is that a lot of them cut their teeth on short films, which you probably are well aware of. And so I feel like a lot of the audience that listens to the podcast, they're making shorts, but maybe they want to make features. And so, how do they transition to that is always a question, whether it's budget or editing or music or whatever. So I just wanted to kind of get a sense of when they're approaching you, okay, now they want to do a feature, like what extra considerations they've got to take into account.
Well, when doing a feature, first things first, let me caveat here and say it's like when you're doing shorts, also understand the pacing of the music, which is dependent upon the editing that is done. And when in doubt, you don't just stuff music in there to overcompensate or to compensate for the poor acting. If the acting can't carry the scene, music sure as hell is not going to fix it. Just like when you're writing music, or like when I'm writing music for a comedy, you don't want to say the same joke twice. You're supposed to be supporting the story, supporting the acting on screen. And hopefully directors understand that, look, in my opinion, you use music sparingly, only when it's needed, because what should be done is the director should be getting as much as they can out of the actors to tell that story. And all music is supposed to do is support and lift up that story itself. So when in doubt, go back and reshoot if you can, even though it might cost more. But those are just the lessons that you learn. I mean, you're supposed to cut your teeth on filmmaking, and when you transition into feature making, wow, oh my gosh, geez, I mean, it's so huge. I mean, here's the thing: I'm not a filmmaker. Like I help the filmmaker. I help support the filmmaker's story. I don't mind being in the background. I don't mind supporting the story. I don't know if I would really be qualified to really help discuss the difference between short film and transitioning to a feature. Like, I just don't want to say anything, to send people in the wrong direction, because I'm usually called in after the fact when it's either decided it's a short or a feature, and then we discuss and I help tell the story.
Gotcha.
But maybe talking to someone like Sonia O'Hara and Vincent, like in the last podcast that you did, I love that interview that you did with them. That was fantastic. Definitely.
Thanks. They were really interesting folks, and they've got a nice project, and their approach was great.
Yeah. Those are the kind of people that, as we've talked about, lifting up the story, being great collaborators, getting along with one another, taking care of them. They were speaking our language, John. And Sonia and Vinny are two people that I would be interested in working with in the future, because they seem to get it. They understand the hard work. They've had to cut their teeth. They have bled for what they have done. And so, like, I've reached out, and we'll see if they get back to me and stuff. They're busy people, but those are people that, like, what, I'm going to reach out to, because they've got the right idea. They've got the attitude that I want to be a part of. So, nice interview. Great. That was a great interview, John.
Well, great. I'm glad that's doing what it's supposed to do by making those connections and bringing awareness to other artists. So that's great. I'm glad you reached out to them.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wind this down, I want to talk about maybe the two features that are most current for you. Santa's Boot Camp comes out, I believe, in about 3 weeks.
November 15th.
Right, so that'll be released, and then you're also working on, I guess, a feature version of the short film, The Shoes. Is that correct?
Yeah, yep. That's really cool, and actually, that is ties back into the earlier question they had about transitioning from short film to feature. That is funny thing is I don't feel qualified, but that is a precise example of a short film, which ended up being like a 30-minute short film, so not quite a short film as we would think of it, but that was a short film that was turned into a feature, and that I get to work with Mike Bierman on, the screenwriter. So we're turning that into a feature, and the lucky part for me there, at least this is what I can say about that, because the short film, The Shoes, was so long, I was able to write themes for characters, write the tempos, write the moods for characters, because it was long enough that I felt it warranted each character having that and the story having a theme. So I was thrilled when they said, yeah, we're turning this into a feature. I'm like, great, I've already written all the themes. So, that was, I'm pretty thrilled, so we're doubling the length of the film, but the hard work is done for me already. So I'll just have to extend and maybe write a few more themes for some auxiliary characters, or write some music beds to support the extra scenes. But that's an example of turning a short into a feature, and I get to keep working with the people. They hired me back on to work on the feature, because some people, if you look, not every director uses the same composer. Not every director uses the same editor. Not every producer hires the same director. So when they brought me on to do the short film, The Shoes, I was thrilled, but even more excited because the test in being a good filmmaker is not if you get hired for a job, it's if you get hired again. And so when Mike and Ramsey Stoneburner, the director, told me and said, look, you know, we love what you did on the short. We'd like you to continue doing the work on the feature. Yes, it made sense, but they didn't have to do that. They could have said, all right, he's done enough, but you know what? He's kind of a dick. I don't really want to work with him. You know, he really loves the Minnesota Vikings too much, and I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan, so I'm just not down with that. Let's go find somebody else. But you do enough work, and you work as hard as you can to develop a great product so people will invite you back. So they invited me back to work on this feature, which is really thrilling because one of the actors in there just got the lead in Pacific Rim 2. I don't know if you remember the Pacific Rim was like 2 years ago. It was like the big like summer blockbuster with the big robots.
Sure, yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it was a fun film. That's what you can say about it. And one of the actors in this little short film called The Shoes, done in Ohio, she got hired to be the lead in the sequel. And so we're all really excited for her. And so we feel, and honestly, we decided to turn this into a feature, long before she got the gig. But with that advantage, we feel it will help us, in finding a distributor for the film. So we're really thrilled for her. Her name's Callie Spaney. And I'm thrilled to be a part of the project. All I got to do is maybe write another 14 minutes of music.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, no, it always helps to have even a little bit of a name to just get, raise your profile just a little bit and bring some attention to your project. So that's great for everybody.
It does. It really does. And she was a really nice person, to work with. She worked really well with the kid actors on there. And so Ramsey, the director, really liked Callie, and so we were all really happy for her. And name recognition will help, but you still got to have a good story. It's like, okay, Callie's work ended up working out really well for her, but we still have to make a great product. You can't rest on your laurels. Just like when you get a job, that doesn't mean your work's done. Once you get the job on something, that's when you turn on the afterburners and you kick into high gear for the rest of the project and beyond. And that's where you got to put in the time. So just getting the gig is not enough.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want to talk a little bit about the Santa's Boot Camp? What was that?
Yeah. Well, what was
that?
What specifically is there anything you would like me to chat about?
Yeah, I guess I think because that's going to be released soon. Just kind of tell me a little bit about the crunch time on that. Like what did you do to finish that? Because I know you met with Ken and it took you guys a while of back and forth of getting the mood and everything. But at what point did you feel like, okay, you guys were on a good path? And then what were your particular challenges to get that Christmas movie, holiday movie finished up so that you felt like it was in the right place and had the right tone and all that fun stuff?
Well, I mean, it was pretty much I had to be there when Ken called upon me to do so. There were lots of times when through the process, through the gauntlet that he had to jump through, Ken Feinberg and Craig Tallis, who is the picture editor, they had to jump through a lot of hoops. And because I became good friends with them, I'm like, look, if there's anything that I can do for you guys, just call me up. I'll be there for you. I want to help. Let's all help each other out here. We all became really good friends on this project because there were some harrowing experiences. I remember, Ken bringing the film to Cannes like last year, and he needed all of the music in a certain format to get to dump in, because at that point we were still doing poor cuts and just sending them MP3s, and you had to be ready and jump on it. And so it was more of, again, understanding your tools so that if people needed something from you right away, and that's often the case, you have to know how to use those tools to be able to export and get whatever they need out so they can use it. And then how else can you help them? I've been doing a lot of interviews too on behalf of Santa's Boot Camp, which I don't need to do. The composer doesn't need to go out and try to be interviewed to promote the film. But what can everybody do on the project to help promote the film? Don't just do your job. Find ways to assist to help help their jobs go easier. Be indispensable in the process. I didn't just write the music and send it off to them and wipe my hands with it and go do another job. No. When it came time to go to the mixing stage, the composer doesn't have to go to the mixing stage, when they're mixing in the dialogue and the sound effects and the music. But I'm like, hey, Ken, I want to be a part of this process. I want to help give my opinion to the sound engineer who's mixing all the stuff together. And so I flew out to LA with them, and we all sat together and we listened to the film. I didn't have to do that, but that's what you're supposed to do. If you want to be successful, how else can you reach out? How else can you contribute to the entire filmmaking process? And so long story short, at the drop of a hat, what can you do? Are you ready and willing to do what you have to bring a film to light? And like Ken says, a film isn't made, it is forced into being. That has never been more true than with this Santa's Boot Camp film. My goodness, wow.
That's great. I love that saying.
Yeah, it really is true.
So is there anything that, to kind of put a period on the end of this conversation, anything that you feel that we didn't talk about that is important to you?
Yeah, actually, John, I'm really glad you asked that. Thank you very much, because there is. I do want to talk about advocacy for the disabled in film and television. I feel it is, I want to help bring persons with different challenges an opportunity to say, hey, I think I want to get into the film industry or TV industry or media in general, YouTube, whatever it is. And so I want to be an advocate for persons with disabilities. So if anyone's out there who has a disability, who has questions, or who are unsure of what they might do, or if they need some encouragement, please feel free to reach out to me. Any filmmakers out there who have friends who they just need someone to just chat about it as somebody who is also disabled. If I can do it, so can a lot of other people. I've got some qualities, but I'm certainly not the best at what I do. It's just it comes down to hard work, and you got to have a quality product, but you have to be willing to work hard. So I want to be there for folks with disabilities. Also, I'm putting together a panel for a convention to discover other persons with disabilities who are in film and television to speak on a panel. So if there's anybody out there who knows somebody, feel free to reach out again. I'm just starting to look at it. But just, again, reach out. All you filmmakers out there, if you have questions and you do have a challenge that you'd like someone to chat about it, I'd be happy to talk to you.
That's great. And so if they do want to reach out to you, how would they do that? Where will they find you?
Easiest, email is fine. Steve Letnes at Gmail. So SteveLetnes at Gmail. My last name spells Nestle, Nestlelatnes.
Okay.
So Steve Letnes at Gmail, and you guys can reach out and holler, and then we can chat. I love talking to people in the industry. This is what we all love to do. This is why we're listening to the podcast. This is how we're trying to glean little pieces of information to help our careers out and to help others.
That's great. I will also make sure to put all that information in the show notes so that if people want to find you, they can just click on it and go right to you. So I'll put your website and all that good stuff.
Right on, John. Well, thank you so much for doing that. Thank you for the interview today. It was really great talking to you. You make it really easy to open up, and you really ask great questions, John. I'm excited to see where this podcast can go.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you being on today.
You bet. Take care, John.
I do hope that interview with Stephen Letnes shed some light on what the process should be like as you work with a composer to score your film. I have one quick announcement before I sign off, and it's that the Kew Gardens Festival of Cinema, of which I am a co-founder of, is now open for submissions. Through both Without a Box and Film Freeway, you can submit your film for consideration at our inaugural year of the festival. The festival itself takes place from August 4th through August 13th in the summer of 2017, and all films screened at the festival will be screened at the Kew Gardens Cinema, Queens' only true art house theater. For more information about the festival, visit kewgardensfestivalofcinema.com, all one word, or go to the show page for this episode at indiefilmnyc.com/IFNYC017 for direct links to the festival page. And as always, if you could visit us on iTunes at John Fallon's Indie Film NYC and leave us a rating and a review, it really helps the show by raising our profile and helping other folks find the podcast. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.